Have you ever had that dream where you're back in school and you're naked? Do you remember the shame, the helpless frustration of that dream? When I was growing up, that dream was my life. Not that I went to school naked, but the shame, the frustration, the sense that everybody was against me, that was real for me. I was 7 years old, and I felt like my school was a battleground where everybody else was on the opposite army. And I didn't know why or how to fix it. That was my life. And this is me. I was kind of awkward, as you may be able to tell. I didn't have a terrible life. My family loved me. I had a couple friends, and when it came to Super Mario Brothers, I was a pretty big deal. But I didn't fit in at school or anywhere, really. And I didn't know why. I would try my hardest to make friends, and I just wouldn't. I would be friendly, and people would be mean to me. I didn't know how to make it work. I had 3 memories from that time. One is that I was walking home from school with my mom and saying, how do you talk to people? I don't even know how to talk to people. Another is that I sat down at a lunch table, and every other kid at that table stood up and walked away. Me being me, I decided to exploit my newfound power, so I followed them from table to table, forcing them to move around the lunchroom before I gave up and ate alone. My third memory is coming home from school sobbing, running into my dad's arms and saying, I'm bad, I'm bad, I'm bad. So growing up was tough, elementary school especially. Middle school was a little bit easier, but I still had a lot of trouble fitting in. I'm the one in the tie-dye. So it wasn't until high school when things really started to turn around for me. You see, my parents are great parents. They're in the audience, and so if you see them, give them a high five. But all parents want to think that their kids are normal, but by this point, my parents had realized that I was marching to a different drummer or maybe an entirely different orchestra. And so they took me to a psychologist right before I started high school, and I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. If you haven't heard of it, Asperger syndrome is a neurological condition on the autistic spectrum, and basically what it does is it made it so I was unable to learn social skills naturally. You can think of it this way. If you take a baby, and that baby is born in Japan, that baby is going to learn Japanese, just growing up naturally listening to the world around it. Whereas if you take an adult who's never spoken Japanese, and you drop them in the middle of Tokyo, that adult's going to have a much harder time. In the same way, for somebody without Asperger's, people learn social skills naturally, just by observing the world around them. Whereas for somebody with Asperger's, it's like being the adult in a foreign country where you don't speak the language. It's much, much harder to learn. So when I was diagnosed, it was this huge epiphany because remember, I didn't know why I was struggling. But now I understood, oh, it's because I don't have social skills. I remember my psychologist gave me a list of the social skills that people with Asperger struggle with, and I was like, oh, all right, let's get to work. And so I started studying social skills. I started reading books on body language, conversation, etiquette, you name it. I started watching movies with my parents where I would pause the movie like 10 times to be like, hey, what just happened in that conversation? Hey, I don't understand why this character did that. Hey, explain these social cues to me. And I started to get better. And it started to make sense. I started being able to figure out the systems that govern the way that people interact. And I started being able to create metaphors and ideas to help me know how to respond. Like, let's talk about body language. Body language is fun. You guys should go to the bookstore, pick up a book on body language. It'll tell you all the different things that your body can do. My favorite is that feet signal intent. So if somebody's talking to you and their feet are pointing right at you, it means that they're very focused in on talking with you. Whereas if they're talking to you and their feet are pointed towards the door, they want to go. And so you should probably let them end the conversation. But body language is also difficult because there's so many different signals that mean so many different things. Like if you rub your nose, it means that you're uncertain. Whereas if you rub the back of your neck, it means that you're anxious. Similar actions, similar meanings, but a little bit different. And so I'd be looking at somebody, trying to figure out what all of their body language is saying, and by the time I'd figured it out, the conversation moved on, and I'd completely forgotten what I was supposed to be talking about. But this is kind of what it's like to try to figure out, okay, I mean, look at this list. What are these people feeling? It's really hard to see in just a moment. So what I did is I decided, okay, let me condense this. And so I took all the body language signals, and I grouped them as just comfort and discomfort. So I decided, all right, I don't need to remember if rubbing your nose means uncertainty or anxiety or indigestion or whatever. I just need to know that it means that you're not totally comfortable and maybe something's wrong. And then I can take that and I can try to figure out what's wrong so I can fix it. So if I'm talking to you and I notice that you start giving off body language signals of discomfort, I can say, all right, let me look at the conversation, let me look at the environment, let me see if there's something that I can fix here. Remember, before, people would get upset with me and I wouldn't know why. I would just be talking to somebody and I think this conversation is going great. And then they would blow up because I missed all of the signals. Now I could start to see what was happening and start to adapt. But I still have to learn how to have conversation. And conversation is tough because there's a lot of conversation books out there, but they all sort of just talk about conversation tips and tricks, which is not very helpful. It's kind of like if you wanted to learn how to play baseball, and all of the books that you read just told you, well, keep your eye on the ball. That's not the rules of the game. You're not going to know how to play. And so I did a lot of study, a lot of practice, a lot of thinking it through, and I figured out the secret to conversation. Are you ready for it? It's ready to write it down or tweet it or whatever. Conversation is a sandwich. Specifically, conversation is like making a sandwich with a friend, where you add an ingredient, and then you pass the sandwich to them. They add an ingredient, they pass the sandwich back to you. I know that you guys probably don't tag team your sandwich creation, but it's a metaphor, so work with me. Because this is the way that conversation is supposed to work. You add something to the conversation, your thoughts, your ideas, a story, and then you invite the other person to speak by asking them a question or something like that. You're adding the ingredient, and then you're passing the sandwich. And then they do the same, they pass it back to you. So now I knew what I was supposed to be doing in conversation. I knew how to keep the conversation flowing and how to know when I was supposed to add something. But I still needed to figure out, how do I be a good conversation partner? How do I make sure that I'm picking topics that people are interested in? And this was difficult for me because I used to ramble so much growing up. Like somebody would ask me, well, what did you do today? And I would tell them. All of it. This was rarely the actual answer that they were looking for. So I had to figure out, okay, how do I tone it back? How do I avoid rambling? How do I only tell them what they're interested in hearing? And so what I decided was I developed this technique that I called the creaky door. And it works like this. Let's say you're getting home late and the door, your front door is old and creaky. You're not going to want to open that door all at once because it's going to annoy everybody in the house. So you open it a little bit at a time, then you open a little bit more, and then you keep going until eventually you've got the door all the way open and you can enter. In the same way, if somebody asked me a question, I would share part of the answer and then give them an opportunity to ask for more. So if, for instance, somebody asked me, what did you do this weekend? I could say, oh, well, I went to the pool. And then I would stop. If they were curious, they could ask me and I would tell them more. And if they weren't, then they wouldn't ask and we would change the topic and no harm done. So I figured out all these different systems for how to interact with people. I had to sort of put it into my own language. And I could keep going. I could keep telling you all the different things that I figured out, but as we discussed, I have a tendency to ramble, so I'm going to cut myself off right there. But the point is this. I started getting better at social skills. I started not being perfect, but being good enough. I started having conversations where I understood the nonverbal signals that were coming to my mind. I started being able to make friends and be a part of a friend group. And guys, I want you to get how incredible this was for me. Like, social interaction was something that I struggled with for my entire life. But now I had learned that it was not a permanent disability, but it was something that I could overcome. Like, that was huge. But even more than that was learning just the joy of friendship. Like, for somebody that was on the outskirts his entire life, to be a part of a friend group, to be somebody that people wanted to hang out with, like, that was so incredible. I think that I realized just how much things had turned around when I got a phone call from my friend Mark. And he said, Daniel, let's get the group together to hang out this week. And I said, okay, sounds like a good idea. And then there was sort of like this long pause. And he said, so you're going to organize it, right? I had somehow moved from social outcast to party planner. And guys, to be somebody with Asperger's that learns social skills, I mean, you could think about that like a kid that has terrible eyesight getting glasses for the first time. But to experience the joy of friendship after a lifetime on the outskirts, That's like giving the kid glasses and then taking him to the Louvre. And so, Spider-Man's Uncle Ben says that with great power comes great responsibility. It's a TEDx University event, so we're going to have some highbrow citations here. So with great power comes great responsibility. And so if I had the power to open the door to this new world of friendship and acceptance, didn't I also have the responsibility to do that for others? So what I did was simple. I started looking for the kids that used to be like me. I started looking for the kids that were weird, that were different, that just didn't quite fit in. And I made friends with them. And what I found is that those kids were the most incredible friends I had. And I think it was their time on the outskirts that made them so incredible. Like, our culture has this weird thing where it thinks that pain isn't normal, where it thinks that the default state of humanity is just to be happy all the time. And so when you have this pressure to fit in, you also have this pressure to bury your pain and put on a happy face. But when you know that you're not going to fit in no matter what you do, when you know that you're an outcast, even if you acknowledge that life is hard sometimes, it gives you the freedom to acknowledge your pain and then to acknowledge the pain in others. And so it builds compassion. Or you can think of it another way. Thoreau went into the wilderness away from society because he wanted to live deliberately. But when society forces you into the wilderness, it also forces you to live deliberately. You can make choices not based on what's in stock, not based on what's in style or what your friends think, but just based on who you want to be and what you want to do. And so as I reached out to these people, I found that they were incredible friends. I found that the people that I reached out to because I thought that they needed me, they were the people that I needed because they were the most able to support me. I'll tell you a story. My freshman year of college, there was a girl that was going through a really hard time, one of my friends, and so I really poured myself into trying to support her. And then, one day, I get a phone call from home, and it's bad news. It's really bad news. I kind of hold it together long enough to get off the phone, and then I just lose it. Like, we're talking tears, we're talking, it was massive. And I'm crying, and then I feel an arm around me. And I look up, and it's my friend that I'd been supporting. She held me, and she comforted me, and she was exactly the person that I needed in that moment. And guys, it wasn't just that my friends helped me learn. It wasn't just that my friends helped support me, but my friends helped me learn that it was okay to need support. Because when I first started being social, when I first started tasting acceptance and what that felt like, I became so afraid of rejection. I became terrified that I was going to do something wrong, that I was going to make some kind of faux pas, and people were going to be like, Daniel's an imposter. He's secretly awkward all along. Let's throw sticks at him. Like, obviously this is not the most realistic fear, but our greatest fears rarely are they? And so I had so much pressure to always put my best foot forward. But that's really lonely, right? Because when you're only putting one foot forward, the rest of yourself is still held back. And so over time, my friends started to show me that they liked me just for me, that I didn't have to be the party planner or the shoulder to cry on all the time. Like, it was okay to just be Daniel, even if Daniel was awkward. Like, this is Sam, who I dated in college. As you can see, she was very good about creating a space where I felt the freedom to just be me, even if that was really awkward. Or here's some of my dearest friends in a Disneyland teacup, because where else do you go with friends? And so this group, we became so close because our freshman year, we decided that once a week we would get together and just make time for being real with each other. That time looked different every week. Sometimes we would discuss a topic, sometimes we would play a game, sometimes we would just hang out and enjoy each other. But the only rule was that we had to bring our real self to that hour. And so I brought real Dan week after week, and I was met with acceptance week after week, even when real Dan was pretty awkward. And so over time, my friends helped me realize that it was cool that I could be Super Dan the social man. It was cool that I learned these social skills and stuff. But I didn't have to be Super Dan the social Dan all the time. Like, it was enough to just be me. And I hope that you guys get that it's enough to just be you. Like, I hope that you get that there are people out there that will like you just the way that you are, and that you shouldn't stop looking for those people. Because I think ultimately it's those people that define us. It's the people that don't give up on us. It's the people that see the good in us, even when we're pretty hard on ourselves. Like the proverb says that it takes a village to raise a child, but really, we need a village around us every day of our lives. My story is the story of a village. It's not the story of me. It's the story of the support that I received early on from my family when I was struggling so much. It's the story of the friends that encouraged me so I could encourage somebody else. It's the story of the kind words that I got that I could pass on. Ultimately, it's the story of the idea that everybody deserves a place where they belong. Like, when I was 7 years old, I ate in the cafeteria alone because nobody else wanted to sit with me. If I tried to sit with them, they would leave. I think it's safe to say that nobody else in that cafeteria saw any value in me. But I think it's also safe to say that the people in my life that did see value in me were the reason why I was able to get to where I was today. Like, I mean, I don't want to brag, but I run a website about social skills that's been visited over 250,000 times. The news has done a story on me, and I'm kind of giving a TEDx talk about my life right now. I think it's safe to say that there was value in me, for sure. But I realized that because of the people in my life that let me know. And I realized that I couldn't have done it alone. And guys, the point of my talk is really simple, and it's this. Nobody deserves to be alone, and nobody can really make it alone. So if you are alone, reach out to people. Let people know. And if you see somebody else that's alone, be their friend. Like when I was 7 years old, sitting alone in that cafeteria, I was desperate for somebody to come up to me. I was desperate for somebody to sit down at my table and let me know that I was worth being friends with. If you had been in that cafeteria with me, if you had seen the kid eating lunch by himself every day, would you have been the one to sit down next to me? And if your answer is yes, then could you be the one that would sit down next to somebody today that's in just as much a need of a friend as I was then? Like, could you be the one that would see somebody that everybody else has rejected and say, I can accept that person? Would you be the one that sees somebody that might be awkward or weird or different and be able to say, you know what, they might make a really cool friend? And then could you be friends with them? Could you sit down next to them and ask their name? Could you listen to their story and become a part of it? I promise you that if you do, you just might find that they become an incredible part of